Imagine walking for weeks through a landscape you have always known. Familiar trees, familiar animals, familiar ground beneath your feet. The world you were born into, the world your parents knew, the world that had been the entire universe of your species for as long as anyone could remember. Then one morning you climb a ridge you have never climbed before, you reach the top, and the world ends. Not in fire, not in darkness, in water, water so vast it has no other side, water that moves and breathes and roars like something alive. Water that stretches to the horizon and keeps going, farther than your mind can follow, farther than anything you have ever tried to imagine. There is no word in your language for what you are looking at. There is no memory in your entire lineage that has prepared you for this moment. You are looking at the ocean for the first time, and you have absolutely no idea what it is. This moment happened. It happened to real people, ancestors of yours, at some point in deep human prehistory. And the evidence of what they did next, what they felt, what they decided, is written into the archaeological record in ways that are only now beginning to be understood. The story of humanity's first encounter with the ocean is not just a story about water. It is a story about the edge of the known world and what happens to a mind that reaches it. Go back approximately 100,000 years. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, had existed for roughly 200,000 years by this point, but had spent most of that time in the interior of Africa in grasslands and forests and river valleys. The ocean was not part of their world. There is no evidence in the archaeological record that early Homo sapiens had any sustained contact with coastlines before this period. Then something changed. Archaeologist Curtis Marion at Arizona State University has spent decades excavating a site called Pinnacle Point on the southern coast of South Africa. What he found there rewrote the timeline of human coastal behavior. Roughly 160,000 years ago, at a series of caves overlooking the Indian Ocean, early humans were not just visiting the coast. They were living there, they were eating shellfish harvested from the rocks below. They were using ochre, a red mineral pigment, to mark their bodies or their objects, the earliest evidence of symbolic behavior ever found. And they were using heat to improve their stone tools, a level of technological sophistication that had never been documented this early before. Marion's conclusion is striking. The coast did not just feed these early humans, it transformed them. The reliable caloric richness of shellfish, the dense nutrition of marine foods, gave their brains the energy needed to make a cognitive leap forward. The ocean, the thing they had never seen before, the thing that must have terrified and astonished them in equal measure, turned out to be the very thing that accelerated the development of the modern human mind. But what did it feel like? What actually happened inside the body and brain of a person standing at the ocean's edge for the very first time? Here is what the science tells us. The human threat response, governed by the amygdala, activates automatically when confronted with something vast and uncontrollable. The ocean, with its roaring waves, its unpredictable surges, its sheer incomprehensible scale, would have triggered an immediate flood of cortisol and adrenaline. Every instinct would have said, this is danger. This is beyond anything you know how to handle. This is a boundary. But alongside that fear, something else. Psychologist Dasher Keltner at the University of California, Berkeley, has spent years studying the emotion of awe, the specific state that arises when a human being confronts something that exceeds their existing mental frameworks. His research shows that awe does something unique in the human brain. It temporarily quiets the default mode network, the brain system responsible for self-referential thought, the constant internal chatter about your own needs and fears and identity. When you experience genuine awe, you briefly stop being just yourself. You become part of something larger. Keltner calls this the small self, and the ocean, he argues, is one of the most reliable triggers of this state in human experience. For your ancient ancestors standing at the ocean's edge for the first time, this would have been overwhelming. Not just frightening, not just beautiful, something far beyond either. A total reorganization of what they understood the world to be. Everything they had ever known existed inside a boundary. The ocean was the boundary itself, and it had no end. Think about the specific sensory experience. The sound would have reached them before the sight, a deep rhythmic roar unlike anything in the interior landscape, not thunder, which was familiar, not a river, which had a direction and a logic, something that rolled toward them and pulled back over and over with a pulse that felt almost biological. Then the smell. Salt in the air, dense and sharp and entirely unknown. Then the sight itself, the horizon. For a person who had spent their entire life in forest and savanna, the horizon was always interrupted by trees, by hills, by the familiar shapes of the landscape. The ocean offered a horizon with nothing in it, just the curve of the earth itself disappearing into blue. And then something extraordinary happened. They went closer. Archaeological evidence from Pinnacle Point and other early coastal sites shows that these first ocean dwellers did not retreat from the water. They engaged with it. They learned the tidal rhythms. They learned which shellfish were safe and which were dangerous. They learned to read the behavior of the waves. They developed over generations an intimate knowledge of a completely alien environment. Cognitive scientist Michael Tomasolo at Duke University has written extensively about the uniquely human capacity for cumulative culture, the ability to build knowledge across generations in ways no other species can match. The ocean, he argues, would have been one of the earliest and most demanding tests of this capacity. Every lesson learned at the water's edge had to be remembered, transmitted, and built upon, because mistakes at the ocean's edge could be fatal. But the ocean gave back more than it took. The coastline of southern Africa during this period, roughly 100 to 200,000 years ago, offered something no interior landscape could match: a nearly endless supply of predictable, harvestable food. Shellfish attached to rocks do not run away. They do not require hunting, they simply require knowing when the tide is low. For a species that had spent hundreds of thousands of years in a constant state of caloric uncertainty, this was revolutionary. The coast was the world's first reliable food source, and the humans who figured out how to use it thrived. Marion's research suggests something even more profound. He believes the southern coast of Africa may have been a refuge during a period of extreme climate change, when most of Africa's interior became too dry and hostile to support large human populations. The coast, buffered by the ocean, remained livable. The small group of humans who found their way there, who overcame their fear of the vast water and learned to live beside it, may have been among the direct ancestors of every human being alive today. The entire population of modern humanity, 8 billion people, may descend from a group that survived precisely because they did not run from the ocean. They stayed, they learned, they ate what the sea offered, and something in the human brain was never quite the same again. Because here is the part that the archaeological record hints at but cannot fully explain. The ocean does not just feed the body, it does something to the mind. Every culture that has ever lived near the sea has developed myths and stories and spiritual beliefs centered on the water. The ocean appears in the earliest religious traditions of every coastal culture on Earth, not as a resource, but as a living force, a god, a mystery, a place where the rules of the ordinary world do not apply. Why would a practical food source inspire such profound spiritual meaning across every culture independently? Dasher Keltner's research on awe offers an answer. Repeated exposure to something that triggers the small self, something that consistently reminds you that you are tiny and the world is incomprehensible, rewires the brain over time. It makes people more pro-social, more collaborative, more willing to contribute to the group. People who regularly experience awe are measurably more generous, more connected to others, more likely to describe their lives as meaningful. The ocean, experienced daily, generation after generation, was an awe machine. It was reshaping the social and psychological character of the people who lived beside it. The first humans who saw the ocean were terrified. They were astonished. They were standing at the edge of everything they knew, looking at something their minds had no category for. And then they did the most human thing possible. They walked toward it, they sat beside it, they watched it until it became familiar, and then they called it home. Tonight, if you ever find yourself standing at the edge of the sea, watching the waves come in and pull back, feeling that particular quiet that settles over you at the water's edge, that is not just relaxation. That is 160,000 years of memory. Your nervous system recognizes this place. Your ancestors learned to survive here. They looked at the same horizon you are looking at and felt the same pull, and they stayed. Guys, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like button and do subscribe for more related content. Thanks for watching.